After exploring my home country of Italy and various other Western European countries, I think a much needed vacation away from the old continent is needed, one across the Atlantic Ocean in the spectacular country of Mexico. That's right, in this now 5th entry of the series, we will explore Mexico, the 10th biggest country in the world in terms of population and the 13th in terms of size. Mexico is a fantastic nation, filled with history, culture and wonderful sceneries, from the jungles of the south to the deserts of the north. Not many games are developed around here, but I can assure you that the list of titles set in Mexico does not disappoint. In the first and biggest chunk of the video, I will list and describe all games set in Mexico, all titles that have an open world or a level based on a real-life counterpart in one of the 32 Mexican states. In the second bonus half, I will mention games that are heavily inspired by Mexican culture, as well as some extras such as sim and strategy games. So, without further ado, roll the intro. Starting our journey at the southern regions of the country in the Yucatan Peninsula, we immediately kick off this list with Square Enix Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a game that sets its prologue chapter in the island of Cozumel, just off the shores of Quintana Roo. To say this game's depiction is beautiful is to say the least. The game's graphical fidelity truly brings to life the island, with her festive town celebrating the famous Mexican holiday of Dia de los Muertos and uncharted temples hidden in nature. There is beauty in both, and while the rest of the game takes place in Peru, I think many Mexican gamers did enjoy having this glimpse over their land in gaming. In the same region of Mexico, we found the famous Mayan ruins of Tulum, one of the many destinations of veteran Kenway in Assassin's Creed 4. Mayan ruins are synonymous with mystery and treasure, and it is no wonder that the Caribbean pirate explored this part of Mexico in his journey. Ubisoft did its place justice, recreating the atmosphere well, even if there are some creative liberties when it comes to the content inside the hidden city. Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 also stops by Tulum. While the real strategy's depiction is a bit older, it is still pleasant to see more than one game publisher interested in Mayan history. But I know what you're all thinking when I say Mayan history. You're probably thinking of the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Chichen Itza, a masterpiece built over 1,000 years back in the state of Yucatan. The King of Fighters 23 showcases it in the background of one of its stages. While not explorable inside, the pyramid is very recognizable and it makes for a fantastic scenery in the fighting game. Assassin's Creed Liberation also has the surrounding ruins of Chichen Itza with its iconic Kukulkan pyramid remade in 3D, but there is not much that the player can do around here. It also appears on AC3, I believe. Not far from it, there is a famous Chicxulub crater, site where the famous asteroid brought the dinosaurs to extinction. Apart from being the final chapter for the dinosaurs, it is also the final chapter for Resistance 2, where the final battle takes place. The stakes are high, as the symbolic location chosen. The last location in the state of Yucatan proper is the small city of Sisal, present in the MMO role-playing game Pirates of the Burning Sea. Sisal is not one of the biggest outposts the Spanish built when discovering southern Mexico, but it is still a crossroad for all navigators in the upper part of the peninsula. In fact, the state of Campeche was a bit more prevalent during the golden age of piracy, and in the same game, the city of San Francisco de Campeche is quite the hotspot. Here the Spanish really fortified against pirates, Dutch and the English raiders, building a fort to stand strong in the Caribbean coast of southern Mexico. Going a bit more south, we found some more Mayan ruins, more specifically in Palenque in the Chiapas region. Here, Serious Sam the Second Encounter uses the site as a setting for his campaign. Not much to comment since, as you can see on screen, the title takes some liberties with its recreation, but hey, it makes for a fine addition nonetheless. Tabasco is the 5th state on the list, and as far as my research goes, it can be explored in only one title, in yet again Pirates of the Burning Sea. Here, the city of Villahermosa functions as an important hub in the game, though as you can imagine, the game's focus is not quite exactly in its cities, but rather, well, the sea. Just for completion's sake, the game also has another city in Mexico, the beautiful city of Veracruz. This time, however, it is not the sole game that decided to depict the metropolis, since 2 multiplayer arenas of Overwatch 2 are also located here. The futuristic multiplayer game gives a redesign to the town, while keeping it somewhat recognizable. The Fortress of San Juan and the Malecon Fountain are 2 landmarks that can be recognized in-game, along its iconic Riviera. The last location in southern Mexico visible in gaming is Acapulco, in the state of Guerrero. While the D-Day is chosen by narration rather than graphics, feel as well can pass by the famous town during the Franco-Mexican War in order to win its bet to travel around the world in 1872. I really enjoyed this game, and I will take the chance to remind you that I reviewed it in the channel earlier this year. Moving towards the geographic center of Mexico, we reach the nation's capital, Mexico City, the biggest metropolitan area in North America. Yes, even bigger than New York and Los Angeles. As you can imagine, there are various games set here, and in this video I'll mention various that play very differently from each other. The first one I'll mention is Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, a game set during a fictional war. While it is never fun to explore a city during wartime, it is impressive to see Plaza de la Constitución and Palacio de las Bellas Artes so recognizable within a game. The title itself takes place across the streets of the capital, where the protagonist has to fight street by street to move forward and achieve victory. Next up, there is a small indie game, Mexico 1921 A Deep Slumber, a game set 100 years ago in the capital. As the title suggests, the game takes place in the 20s, years after the famous Mexican Revolution, where everything was turned upside down. I always find the idea of learning history with video games fascinating, and I'm definitely interested in learning more about this country's history with this indie title. For racing fans out there, I want to of course mention the home of the Mexican Grand Prix since the 70s, the Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez, located entirely within Magdalena Mixhuga Park in Mexico City. What to say, the track is famous for its high elevation and the stadium passage Foro Sol that gives the track a unique look among the rest. Always a pleasure racing around here. At last, for completion's sake, the obscure 1993 Mario's Missing game does have a level set here. This game is certainly quite odd and not Nintendo's greatest hit, but it does depict the city in one of its level, and it even asks the player to find important items such as the Angel of Independence and the Templo Mayor in order to progress within the story. I usually don't mention mods in these videos, but the new Fallout Mexico was just announced and it looks incredible. I have to quickly give it a shoutout and I hope the fan-made game does well when it comes to depict the capital. Just as a second honorable mention, the upcoming game Mictlan, An Ancient Mythical Tale is supposedly going to be set in Tlatelolco, today within Mexico City. I'm not sure what's up with the development of this game, but for the looks of it, the project looks promising, giving a modern gameplay look at the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire. If you're from Mexico, let me know more about this game's background. Just outside of the capital, in the Edomex state, we can find various Aztec landmarks explorable in 3 different games. The Moaya serves as the setting as one of the last missions of 007 Legends. The ruins are definitely not remade one-to-one, but they do feel authentic enough to be somewhat recognizable. On the other side of the state, there is the more famous Teotihuacan, explorable in Serious Sam: The Second Encounter and visible in the background of a stage in The King of Fighters 2. Both games play homage to the UNESCO World Heritage Site by both a 2D as well as a 3D depiction, bringing to light one of the most important cities in the continent before the discovery. Moving further, we find ourselves in the state of Guanajuato, where racing is apparently a big thing since there are 3 titles to discuss. MXGP 2021 is a dirt bike race game that has a track near the city of León, and many WRC games such as WRC 8 have the famous Guanajuato Rally, taking place in the greater part of the state's outskirts. Both very interesting iterations for fans of outdoor racing. But the cream of the top is none other than Forza Horizon 5, a game that goes the extra mile in remaking the majestic city of Guanajuato, as well as its surroundings. In fact, the game creates a whole miniature version of Mexico, with jungles in the south and deserts in the north, but the most accurate depiction made in the game is the city herself. From Plaza de la Paz to Iglesia de San Diego, the city is fully recognizable in-game, perhaps the best entry on this list. Just a bit more to the east of Guanajuato, we have Jalisco, home to the enchanting city of Guadalajara. 2 are the games that take a detour here, Metal Gear Solid Rising: Revengeance and Super Street Fighter 2. The former title only has a mission set in the city, more specifically in the sewers, while the latter is again a 2D depiction that functions as a background. The building Capcom decided to draw to represent the city is the Hospicio Cabañas, located in the historic center. It is time to leave central Mexico to move to the last major region of the country, the northern frontier. Unlike the jungle-rich south and the highlands of the center, the north is dominated by various deserts, home to many states of the country. First one on the list is Baja California, that, as the name suggests, it is just south of the American state with the same name. Payday 2 out of all games set one of its bank robberies in the border city of Tijuana, near San Diego. Well, actually the bank robbery itself is set in a fictionalized place, but the follow-up mission does take place in a crossing checkpoint in the Mexican city, mission named appropriately Breakfast in Tijuana. 25 to Live also is a mission set in Tijuana, but as you can judge by yourself, this is not the most fresh look a game has given to the town. Battlefield Hardline also has a map set in a border checkpoint in Tijuana. I'm not too sure if this is to be applauded or if these American depictions of the border region seen as just a place to pass by are getting a bit repetitive. You can make your own judgment. The last 2 games that are set in the peninsula that I found are Baja Edge of Control and Dirt 4, 2 dirt racing games that have tracks near the Pacific edge of the country. Not much to add from the ones already mentioned in the video, but fun additions nonetheless. Just a bit more east, there is a small town of Puerto Lobos in the state of Sonora, destination in Life is Strange 2. Explaining this location more in detail would be a bit of a spoiler of the game, since the game revolves around reaching this place, so I'll just mention it exists and it's a sole game set in Sonora. Chihuahua follows suit, and the number of games set in Ciudad Juarez rivals the number of games set in the nation's capital. Juarez is a border town attached to El Paso, Texas, and it is both the setting of modern as well as far western games. It will come to no one's surprise that the Call of Juarez franchise is set around here, though not all games of the series do have a level specifically in Ciudad Juarez. The two titles that do are Call of Juarez Blood in Blood and The Cartel, the former set in 1864 and the second one in modern times. The former is a very well received game, telling a nice story between two brothers that fought during the American Civil War in the south and traveled all the way to the west and below the Rio Grande. The latter title, on the other hand? Well, let's just say it's best to be avoided. Two other games set in Juarez are Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, already discussed earlier in the video, and the upcoming Black Noise Shutdown, a survival horror indie game. Not much to say for both, but they are definitely welcome on the list. The sole game set in the state of Chihuahua but not in Juarez is Mulaca, located in Sierra Tarahumara. This game is inspired by the Ramamuri Native Americans in northern Mexico, one of the biggest indigenous groups still intact present in the country. The game's art direction is very inspired, and the gameplay looks fun too, not to mention the cultural immersion the game provides over a group of people you might not always think about when thinking about Mexico. At last, to end in style, how could I not mention the two Red Dead Redemption games? Now, the titles do take place in a fictionalized region of Mexico, but from what I gathered, there is a consensus that Nuevo Paraíso is basically the real-life state of Coahuila and surroundings, so we'll go for that. The two Red Dead are simply the Far West made video game, being loved by millions of players all across the world. The Mexican regions are not the focus of the game, but they are key parts of certain missions, part of both games that take place across the border, depicted in a jaw-dropping digital painting. Mexico has never looked so beautiful in gaming. And with that, amigos, we have concluded the main part of the video, listing all games set in real-life landmarks and cities in the great country of Mexico. But before we close off the video, I did want to dedicate a second, smaller part to games inspired by Mexican culture, as well as some sports, simulators and strategy games. In my lengthy research, I found various games that are not set in a specific part of Mexico, but are nonetheless heavily inspired by the rich culture the country has. Usually in these type of videos I do not mention them at all, but after reading the feedback, I'll give them some love. Guacamelee and Pato Box are two games heavily appreciated by many Mexican fans. Guacamelee takes the luchador icon as their main incipit for the story, while Pato Box is a more satiric look at corporatalism in Mexico City. Some mainstream titles such as Mario Odyssey, Sonic Adventures and Metal Slug 3 have levels set in Mexican landscapes. The first has the famous Tostarena town, inspired by the northern parts of Mexico, while the other two depict more of the southern regions, with the dense jungles and Mayan-inspired temples. Grim Fandango goes beyond the living world, exploring the mythical and culturally rich world that is Mexico's underworld, heavily celebrated in Dia de los Muertos. I may have not mentioned this in the channel, but I adore Grim Fandango and his protagonist, Manny Calavera. Some shooters like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Call of Duty Cold War and Modern Warfare 3 also decided to dedicate multiplayer maps to the Mexican country, and they are probably not the only ones. Same goes for Need for Speed 2 and Army of 2. And hey, remember that old game that I recently reviewed, Jackie Chan Adventures for the PS2? Well, that also happens to have the first chapter set somewhere in the nation. The last honorable mention that I want to make is Aztec Forgotten Gods, a game that has the curious premise of futuristic Mesoamerican civilizations, where the protagonist roams around in a world filled with technology and Aztec mythological creatures roaming the land. There are some games such as FIFA FC, Microsoft Flight Simulator, Railroad Empire, and 18 Wheels of Steel that have a variety of locations depicted in Mexico and other countries, but if I were to include all of the stadiums and all the stations of those games, the video will never end. Still, I do invite you to check them out. And at last, we have our usual strategy games that let you play as either Mexico or the Mesoamerican kingdoms that came before, mainly the Mayans and the Aztecs. To mention a few before the end of the video, for games set in the past we have Age of Empires 2, the Civilization Saga, Expeditions Conquistador, Total War Medieval 2, especially with the American expansion, and Europa Universalis 4, that lets the player play as either the Spanish conquistadors or the Native Americans. For a more modern experience, Victoria 3, Superpower 2, Total War Empire and Hearts of Iron 4 have a playable modern Mexico. Hoi 4 specifically is enhanced with the Mendegan DLC, giving Mexico a dedicated focus tree. I would describe each game in more detail, but at this point I've been listing them in 5 different videos, so I invite you to explore them yourself and enjoy playing as Mexico and the Aztecs. So there you have them, all video games set in Mexico, from the Sonora Desert to the Yucatan jungles. I hope you had a great time exploring Mexico today with me, especially the Mexican viewers who might not have been aware of the magnitude of games set here. I was not able to find a good single source that had a big list of games set in Mexico, but I do want to give a special thanks to Projamo that shared with me his map of all games set around the world, as well as all the Mexican creators that made similar lists in Spanish that I invite you to check out. Señoras y señores, muchísimas gracias. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many Mexico times for watching today's video. It was truly a joy exploring a nation so diverse and exciting as Mexico. I never had the pleasure to visit, but at least I got a glimpse of it in gaming. What new nations should I explore next? Just as a reminder, I already explored the ones you see on screen, in what is probably going to be a rushed paint map. I wish you a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci.